Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've ever wanted to feel better about yourself and put the heart and passion back in your life, then do we have the Happiness Show for you. Today I'll be talking with LEAH PEARLMAN, human being extraordinaire, the creator of the Facebook like button, Facebook pages, and a phenomenal new book that tugs at your heartstrings, Drawn Together. And that's just what I want to talk with her about today, about opening up our hearts and bringing more happiness back in. That plus we'll talk about Momo the cat, the power of Burning Man, learning to surf, dressing like a kitty, Tim and kissing pencils, and what in the world bees and BandAids has to do with anything. So welcome to the show, LEAH. Are you ready to shine?
I'm ready.
Woohoo! So before we dive right into things, I've got to ask, I know it's the most over-asked question out there, but how in the world did you come up with the like button?
So I know you have to picture a world about 8 years ago, maybe hard to remember, an internet land without like buttons. And back at that time, all you could do was comment. So people would put photos, status updates, notes, and people would comment. And that's just the way the world worked. Mm-hmm. And one thing I started to notice was a few things. So people would write something like, I just got a new job. And everybody would write in the comments field, congratulations, congratulations, congratulations. And maybe like 12 deep, there'd be some very thoughtful comment. And this created a few problems. One, it was if you didn't have something new to say, you might not say anything because you didn't want to be the 51st person to say congratulations. Also, as the person who created the content, you might not see the clever comment someone left in the stream of similar comments. Mm-hmm. So as a person I was always a blogger and a writer, and I put a lot of content on Facebook. I became aware of this and was wondering, how do we, one, help people leave some more, comments or validation, even if they don't have something new to say? And two, how do we collect all of those similar comments into one place so you don't have to read all those, leaving the comments free for the more, creative, clever content. So that was where the idea originally called the awesome button came from. Yeah.
Hard not to say awesome.
Yeah.
I'm thinking maybe now what we need is a woohoo button. Woohoo! So if you don't mind me asking, if we go back in time to that time period, it seems kind of ironic because it sounds like things weren't going so hot maybe internally for you at the time.
Yeah, so I was living it's still confusing to this day, it felt like two lives, mm-hmm. sort of. So I was working at Facebook, I was doing really well, I loved everything about what I was doing. I loved my coworkers, I loved the creativity, I was really on fire about it. And Facebook was doing so well, so it was just so exciting to walk around wearing a sweatshirt that said Facebook, and people would be like, oh my God, you work at Facebook. It was just an incredibly exciting, creative, and validating time. By the time I had gotten to Facebook, though, I had already, maybe since the time I was 5 or 6, I had kind of gotten on I need to go to an Ivy League school. Mm-hmm. I need to get a good job. I'm not sure, I didn't know about good job necessarily, but I was just kind of a validation junkie from a very young age. And I want to be the best. I was super competitive. So that started when I was really young. And when I hit middle school, I think, I started having, conflicting things. I wanted to fit in with my friends, but I also wanted to do really good in school. And I started to just get really hard on myself, just a lot of pushing. I needed to be, fit in with my friends at school, fit in with my friends at camp. I needed to fit in with my teachers. And I became a pretty intense perfectionist.
The question that I don't want to take us too off track, but yeah. There's no LEAH fitting in with LEAH.
LEAH who? There was a very clear image of what success looks like. And, mm-hmm. and I would try things, I get these great scores in school and everyone would say, oh my God, that's amazing. And that would feel really good. And, I still had a personality. There was still me somewhere in there, but anything that wasn't fitting that validation scheme didn't feel like it belonged. Mm-hmm. So I felt like I started to bifurcate. So there was this public face that was doing really well, had all the success, and then there was this private one, which it's hard for me to talk about only because I didn't know her very well because she was private even to me. It was kind of like any feeling that would come up that I didn't want to deal with, I would just shove back down, like time to check my BlackBerry, time to go back to work, time to hang out with these people. And I wasn't facing the fact that something in me was pretty miserable. And I was in a lot of pain that I wasn't acknowledging. And I wasn't acknowledging because it didn't make any sense. It was like, look at my life. Everything's great. There's no room for pain here. So I would feel guilty about feeling bad. And I just wouldn't face it.
I think there are a lot of people that are actually going through that, where we're not either facing the pain or we're moving so full throttle ahead, doing everything we can so that we don't even recognize the pain.
Right. And I think, this is not going to be, I think everyone's aware of this, but there's this phenomenon, I think, that is created by sites like Facebook, where you look out and you see your friends all having a great time because of the nature of what we post. Mm-hmm. So then it gets confusing. It's like, oh my gosh, everybody else is having a great life. There's no room for this. So because we have these skewed windows on each other's lives, it can exacerbate the problem because you really think something's wrong if you're not, playing in the beach every weekend or putting up a new art exhibit or holding your new baby or whatever it is you think all your friends are doing all the time.
Absolutely right. There is quite the irony in that, isn't
there?
Yeah. So if you don't mind me asking, and this is something I struggled with as a professional athlete for many years, and I had some eating challenges to say the least. Is this when you had eating challenges yourself?
So that started for me when I was probably in middle school. Oh, wow. So I started... the way it happened for me was I went to this kind of cool, grungy inner city school where we'd, eat nachos and watch football on the weekends. And then I went to this very elite, horseback riding summer camp that all the girls were very thin and beautiful. And because I had such a desire to fit in, I was trying to figure out how to, hang out with the friends at home, but look like the girls at camp. And somewhere in there, I developed bulimia. So I eat like a normal person, and then I would go and throw it all up. So it started as I think just a tool to try and fit in. Mm-hmm. But over time, it started to become a way to manage all of my stress. So if I wasn't fitting in any way, like if I was stressed about something at school or I was stressed about a job or something, anytime that stress feeling would come up, my response would be to soothe myself by eating, but then throwing it up because I needed to still fit into my ideas of, what I thought was worthy. And then, so it just sort of took on a life of its own. First, it was just sometimes, and then it was sort of any stressful feeling. After a while, it was even any happy feeling. Anything that was like too much for me to hold in my body, like energy-wise, or what if this validation goes away, or what if I'm a fraud and I didn't really deserve it? It would all lead to the same path.
So you're going along at Facebook. You've got an eating challenge going on. You have kind of two of yous in there. Oftentimes it really takes, and this is also speaking from personal experience, cosmic guidance with a 2x4 to get us to stop in our tracks. Can you tell us kind of maybe what I hadn't thought about it till this minute, what your 2x4 was at the time?
Yeah. So by the time, there came a point where I felt really desperate. So it had been maybe 10 or 12 years, I'm not sure, of this disorder where every single time I threw up, I would swear to myself it was the last time. Like every day. That's crazy. It's delusional. It's like, I'll just stop now. I'll just stop now for over a decade. And I reached a point where I started to realize that wasn't happening. Mm-hmm. And I was desperate for something different. But I didn't have the courage to walk away from this great life that I was living. I didn't know what it would take to get better, but I just didn't have the courage to acknowledge that was happening for me. And then my dad, who was the closest person to me, had been going in and out of cancer treatment, or cancer had been going in and out of him, actually. So he'd had it and then remission, and then it came back and then remission. And there was just a day when it came back again after we were really hoping it wouldn't. And it was lung cancer, which is, pretty serious as far as cancers go. So there was a day that it came back. My mom called me, and my first reaction was, I don't have time for this. I have too much work to do. I was so in the flow of how packed my life was. I had no space for anything. And then I felt that reaction, and immediately I just was like, I don't know myself, because the one thing I did know about me, or one thing I knew about me, was how much I loved my dad. And I'd always been a daddy's girl, and we were best friends. And so the fact that I didn't have space for that just was the moment I realized I don't know who I am or what I care about, but now it's time to change. Now I need to do something. So it was that was my 2x4 of like, it's time. And also I needed an excuse a little bit. So I went to my boss and I said, my dad's sick and I need to leave, which was definitely part of the truth. Mm-hmm. But I wasn't able to say the whole truth at that time.
So you got out. What was your path like from then? And then how did you end up at Burning Man?
Well, so so actually when I told my boss I need to leave, it was actually asked for a sabbatical. I wasn't sure that I wanted to leave. I just needed a break. So I had a 6-month sabbatical. And one of the first things that was happening when I took that 6 months off was Burning Man. And I had 2 friends from Facebook who were going. And I don't remember having the thought yet consciously, although it came up soon, which was like, if I need things to be different, I need to do different things. So that 6-month sabbatical, I wrote a post during that time called The Axis of Contrast. Mm-hmm. And the idea was, if this was the axis of contrast, if I'm usually living here, let me try something that's over here and just experience as much contrast. Yeah. As much contrast as I can. And I'd always had a story that I would hate Burning Man, and just didn't seem like it was for me. I had a lot of ideas of what it was. So that became the first thing I did in my axis of contrast to experience something new.
Woohoo! And then when you were there, if you don't mind sharing about this seems, I think it's important for all of us well, I'm not recommending it for people. I'm thinking of myself and some experiences I've had with ayahuasca and a shaman. Maybe you can share what your experience at Burning Man was like, because this kind of, I'm guessing, blew a hole into things.
It did. So I had 2 pretty profound experiences while I was there. One was I didn't have a to-do list.
Awesome.
For the first time since I could remember, and I hadn't really realized that my life, since I started getting homework and, I started saying, like, I need to do this by this, I hadn't really realized that I didn't know how to just follow my own flow. I didn't know how to just, like, follow what interested me. I only knew how to get things done. So the first was being in this place without time, basically. Like, you don't necessarily sleep at night or stay awake during the day. There's none of the rules of time exist. There's nothing that you do for the sake of any future thing. You only do it for the sake of doing it. Mm-hmm. And then there was this whole thing of art, which also didn't really fit into my world. Like, I was very into productivity. We create things for the purpose of something else. And I didn't have a relationship with art, which is pretty funny now. I had actually a negative relationship. Yeah, it was like, okay. I was like, what's the point of art? It doesn't do anything for anyone before I went.
There's the little voice inside of you that's just going, hello.
I've since learned that the moment I say something like that, I've just written my destiny. So that was one thing, just the doing things for the sake of doing them. That was really shifted me. And then I had never done any hallucinogens or anything like that before I went to Burning Man. And that time I had an experience. I was there with an ex-boyfriend, was also at a different camp, and a group of us took ecstasy. And we had broken up, maybe a year ago. And on ecstasy, I remember experiencing, he basically said he wasn't upset with me for ending the relationship. And it was my first real feeling of forgiveness.
Wow.
It made me realize that any time I had done anything wrong or made a mistake, I just logged it somewhere in me as there's another way I messed up, there's another way I failed. And I hadn't been capable of letting myself off the hook for anything. And in that mind-heart space, I was able to really hear him and believe him. And I healed something that I began to heal around the idea of, like, it's okay to make mistakes, or it's okay to do things that hurt other people, or just some kind of permission that challenged the perfectionism in me that wanted to get everything right ahead of time and not offend anyone and not hurt anyone and that whole thing.
So when you left Burning Man with this seed planted, or this foot in the door now, this must have affected, I'm guessing on some level, this started to affect everything.
It did. But I will say it definitely did. And now that I'm several years away from that, I guess I just want to say, in a small way, like, it changed things. But sometimes I have the image of, like, somebody jumping on a trampoline and there's a fence. And it's sort of like my experience of this path since then is like, you jump and sometimes you see something, you're like, oh my God, and then you fall back down, oh my gosh, and you fall back down. Mm-hmm. So in some ways it was a big shift. In other ways, it just helped me see something I hadn't seen. And then there's been just a lot of work to kind of integrate what I learned there. Yeah.
That makes sense. And maybe we can talk about a little bit of it. One of the things that you did that some people would say is the scariest thing in the world is you took a 10-day Vipassana retreat. Yes.
Had I known what I was doing, I might not have ever done it. I thought it was, I didn't really realize what Vipassana was. I didn't know it was Buddhist. I never even thought about, I was very atheist at the time. Mm-hmm. I didn't even think about the sitting part and how incredibly difficult and physically challenging it is to sit for 15 hours a day. All I knew was that, it's 10 days of silence. And I thought, that's contrast, that's different. So I had no idea what I was getting into, but that also shifted. That actually is different than the trampoline metaphor. That really did change my life in a very meaningful way.
What would you say are some of the changes? Because it seems like you really took a different path after that.
Yeah. So the shift didn't happen in the Vipassana. It happened a few days after. Mm-hmm. The best way, so I can't really say because of the sitting meditation, this is how it happened. It's not quite that linear. Mm-hmm. But I can say that maybe that was the first time I really became aware of thinking about thinking. So it gave me a little space for my thoughts being the true narrator of my life. And because we spend so much time just watching the experience, you get to start to see that thoughts say one thing and then they say another thing. And then something that's really true is not true 5 seconds later. So the first thing, I think it gave me just enough distance. Mm-hmm. And then, like I said, I was a devout atheist. I thought anyone in religions were crazy and they were brainwashed. And I really had a chip on my shoulder about that. I don't know why. I was raised, my dad was Jewish, my mom was Christian. Maybe something in that made me think, like, if, these two people come from different religions, then they're both can't be true, or one of them has to be wrong. So I just sort of threw the whole thing out. And then I was in this van ride a few days after the Vipassana retreat, and it was quiet for several hours. I'm like, well, what am I going to do for the next several hours? So I decided I would think about infinity, and I would try to think about
Very
it
cool.
for as long as I could. And because I realized anytime the concept of infinity came up, I would just, like, that's too hard. I can't get my head around that, and I would just avoid it. Mm-hmm. So I started journaling about infinity, and I was somewhere in that process where I started to see, or this was my experience, okay, if there is no beginning and there is no end, and I really held that for a while, then everything just is. And in that moment, I suddenly saw, like, a cohesion to the world, like, oh my gosh, we're one, it's just one complete puzzle. And everything's exactly where it should be, and everything's in its place. and time is an illusion, and there's just an isness, and it's like the number one. There's just everything is, and it's complete. And in that moment, I thought, I think this is what people mean when they say God. I think this is what they might be referring to. Mm-hmm. And so before I thought everything was random and chaos, and in that moment I experienced order. And for the next few days I read everything I could. I was just a voracious reading about all the religions, and every the world's religions was the first book I read that kind of went into each one. And each one just really, my experience, I could see how it mapped onto the theses of each religion, each major world religion. And so in that moment, it's just like my mind was blown. Like all these people I thought were crazy, suddenly I was like, no, I was the crazy one. And it just opened my heart in a way, because that's a lot of people to dislike, distrust, not understand. That's like 5 billion people on the planet or something. So suddenly when everyone started making a lot more sense, that change never went away. So.
Wow. And it also, if everything is perfect, if we're in a sense all one, if this is all, you use the number one, and if the puzzle is complete just as it is, then your whole life of striving, pushing, needing to be doing, filling every moment, none of that was required anymore.
You could look at it both ways. Yeah. So the pushing's not required, and also it's part of my journey. So it was also just perfect. And it's also just a memory. It doesn't even exist anymore in this now moment. So it's all true.
So then let's go from that and talk about one of the non-doings, non-strivings that you have started since then that's quite beautiful. What is the Happiness Institute? How did it come about?
So I came back to work for a while, for another year, at Facebook, and then I left. And one of the reasons I left was because I had become very aware that I was really proficient at this game I had played about, the success game. But I didn't really know how to follow my own heart or to do what I loved. I didn't know what I loved. I didn't know how to pursue my interests outside of what was conventionally approved of. And I found that as soon as I left, well, it wasn't when I left work, because I started realizing that when I left work, I was going to be left with this question, and I was going to be left alone with it. Mm-hmm. And I could, go to yoga studios, or I could go to workshops, but who's helping me find out what I really want to do? That's mine. So as opposed to learning yoga, which might be somebody else's. And I could go to coffee shops, but everybody there is kind of on their laptops working on their own thing. So I started to come up with this idea of a physical space that people could come to in the question of what brings me alive? What am I here to do? And they could collaborate with people. There were rooms where they could rent out and try things, teach something, host something, just a really experimental space for self-actualization. So when I left Facebook, a friend and I founded a space in San Francisco called the Happiness Institute, where we ran it for about a year and a half. That was the intention.
Pretty awesome. How did then, during this time period, how did your drawings come about, or how did you meet your new special friends?
So this will forever be one of the big mysteries of my life. So now I draw comics, and just the other day I was looking at one of my recent ones, and I was just looking at this little stick figure with this just very expressive stick figure face. And I was just asking him, where did you come from? Because I look at him and there's so much personality there. And I cannot take credit for it. I draw the circle and I draw the little line and I draw the little dots, and suddenly there's life there. Anyway, so how did it come about? I guess that's all to say, certainly not by my planning or my intention. One of the days when I think it was after I'd taken the sabbatical, it was, after I had come back from the Vipassana retreat and Burning Man, my dad's latest round of cancer had gone into remission. And during that time, when I did Vipassana in Nepal, and I'd also gone to India for a friend's wedding. And while I was there, I picked up this idea of gratitude journal. So I was keeping gratitude journal, but I've always been kind of a little bit rebellious about structure. So it was just, I got really bored pretty quickly just writing like, I am thankful for the fruit from the trees or whatever. So I would just start adding color, adding picture, like writing it in different ways, just different things to kind of entertain myself. And so it was already getting a little bit just creative. Mm-hmm. And I would frequently take a picture of my gratitude page if there was someone in there I could tag on Facebook. So I'd take a picture, post it on Facebook, and tag that person. So that was all set up for the day when my dad's cancer went into remission. And that was what I felt grateful for. So I drew this little stick figure, like, because that's all that's what I could draw, stick figures, a little panel of cancer calling on the phone and my dad telling cancer he had the wrong number. And, it was terribly drawn and it wasn't that clever, but it got the message across and everybody liked it, probably because, of the message. So it was this kind of really deep thing like, hey, my dad has cancer and he's struggling with it and this good news happened, but there's these ridiculous stick figures, which really made it palatable. Mm-hmm. So it kind of took the drama out of it, I think. And that really worked for me as a person who wasn't used to sharing my pain or what was difficult or hard, finding a light way, but still sharing it. I think that was the seed where something clicked. There's a way for me to stop hiding without, I guess, like kind of being the drama around it all, or being like, I'm posting this on Facebook so everybody tells me, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. It was something different.
Something that's really cool about it is your drawings are both exceptionally personal. They're raw, they're you, they're what you're going through in life, and they're universal. There's something I think I didn't see a single comic in your book, on your Facebook page, anywhere that we can't all relate to. Mm. When the drawings started coming out, how did that change you? Or was it, you were in this process of your heart kind of cracking open? And are like these little characters coming out and saying, we've got stuff to share with you?
It was more like, I would say it started light. So there was the one about my dad's cancer going to remission. I would say the first couple years, actually, I was becoming aware of oneness and like things are okay. I was becoming aware of love and forgiveness, mm-hmm. like through that Burning Man experience. And just Burning Man itself is really an introduction to being loved and loving. And so a lot of my first few years were about, love, everything's great. It was kind of like my awareness of the brightness of life would come through these comics. And it would happen where, I was talking to a friend and he was trying to decide whether to sell his company or to sell his company and follow his passion of music or keep building his company. And, somewhere in there we use the phrase, follow your heart, which is just pretty cliche. But as soon as I said it or he said it, the image of someone like literally stalking your heart, like in kind of a creepy way, like binoculars and, just following a heart all around these different landscapes popped into my head. So it was kind of a way for me to integrate this idea. Yeah, you like the encouragement, and he did sell his company and pursue music. Mm-hmm. So yeah, follow your heart. And then to get to sit for a couple hours with drawing what that meant to me in a clever way would help me integrate that notion. So I say that to say my comics for me have always felt like me talking to me. Or occasionally me talking to someone else to say, that interaction we had or that thing you said, it really meant something for me, and this is what it meant. And by the time I would post them on Facebook, it almost felt like that was complete. The whole arc, the learning, the healing, whatever needed to come from it was complete. And then I could just share it in case it had, for anyone else to get something from.
Beautiful. Can you tell us what are a few of your favorite comments, either back then in the book or most recent ones?
Okay. Oh man. So let's see. So one of my absolute favorites, it's this little comic, and there's not too much of a story about it. I just love it. And he has those like he has tin cans, and he has one up to his own ear. And by the way, I say he, and he kind of occurs to me as a he, although I see myself in all of them. So I just, the problem with pronouns. But anyway, so he has one up to his ear, and he has one up to his mouth. And along the line, it's of the tin can from one to the other, it says, "Psst, I adore you." And the caption is, I tell myself the secrets I need to hear. And I just love that one because I think my healing journey primarily has been about learning to find a voice of inner validation. You're okay. You're great. You're awesome. I wouldn't want to be anyone else. I wouldn't want to be with anyone else. Just this kind of constant loop of reminding myself that I'm loved by me.
Woohoo! That's one of the biggest themes that I try to share with people through this show is, in fact, the first guest that we ever had on the show was Kamal Ravikant. Love yourself like your life depends on it. And I think that is so, so incredibly important. How have you worked to cultivate that in yourself? And if you don't mind me asking, has there been any push back on the inside as you try to love yourself deeper?
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, this feels like my life's journey. It's a practice for sure, and something I stand for and also struggle with continually. So,
it's the dance.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yoga or anything that's a practice or meditation. It's work. It's attention. It's noticing every time I fall out of love and finding the gentlest way back in. So I used to the way I started, I would say, was from the outside. So how can I love myself? It'd be like, well, I'll let myself, leave this party that I'm not having fun at. Or let myself say yes to something or no to something, or let myself treat myself to something. It was very external. This question I was living in was, somebody else had given it to me, like, what's the tenderest, I forget what it was, something like the tenderest way to be with myself. So I was asking that question a lot and seeing how I could answer it externally. So for a lot of years, that was how I started.
And you're saying that it's well, I use the term dance. So you start in that manner, and then it's something I've shared with my audience a lot. I know when I started going down the self-love road, boy, did it push back strongly. My first example is going into a mirror, kind of doing the I can't believe I'm spacing the movie right now. Not The Secret. The other movie where she writes all over herself how she loves herself. And I'm in the mirror saying, I love myself, I love myself, I love myself. And a few minutes later, the bathroom's pretty much trashed and the mirror's broken.
Yeah, that's great. So kind of how I mentioned, I rebel, like in my gratitude journal, I would get kind of bored with the whole thing. I've sort of learned for myself, like affirmations have never worked for me in that way. The reaction comes up so immediate and so strong that it feels to me, that's a great example. Like it's more damage than helpful. I'm having trouble remembering like a bit in my path, but I'll just speak to how I practice now because that's really fresh for me. My favorite way to practice right now is asking questions, and really authentic questions. Because if I state an opinion, something in me, let's say we're all one, then we have all the actions and reactions. So if I state something like I love myself, I can immediately react with like, well, that's clearly not true because of X, Y, and Z. But if I ask a question, it's tricky to have that kind of reaction. So the question might be, how can I love myself more in this moment?
Beautiful.
Or even, where am I not loving myself?
Mm-hmm.
Or where is my worthiness? So what I'm doing is I'm looking for questions that don't have a yes or no answer, because that can do the same thing. Am I lovable? It can create the same, binary yes, no thing. It's just how, where, and they're not made up questions. So this is the other key that's been so helpful for me. I really try to ask the question I'm actually trying to ask. So I look, right now I'm busy trying to get a lot of things done. This isn't right now, but maybe before the interview, I have these to-do lists. I'm getting, check this off, got to draw this, and then suddenly I'm like, what question am I subconsciously asking? And the question might be, how can I feel like enough? Mm-hmm. And I'm asking it unconsciously, but I'm answering it by all this behavior. But if I just pause and ask it, I can give myself enoughness and then choose, what actions I take after I already feel like enough, which I found to be more effective.
I love it. So do you draw it? Do you write it down? Obviously not staying within the lines. How does this conversation play itself out?
Yeah. So lately I've been experimenting all over the place. So I do write it down a lot. Some days, I won't draw a comic, but I'll just spend half an hour drawing in a beautiful way, whatever my question is for the day. One a few days ago is, what is my practice? Mm-hmm. Anyone who practices in this path may find, I've certainly found, the practice itself, you can do it for years and you can still lose track of what you're doing and why you're doing it on a daily basis. So what is my practice? And I wrote it in this beautiful way. And then I would just start writing all the answers that came up. Well, it's this. Well, maybe it's this. Well, it's that. And, little letters around the big, what is my practice? So that's one way.
So I'm very curious. What were the answers you were coming up with? Because this is so important. I got to tell you, I'm kind of like breaking protocol. This is such a beautiful, beautiful interview. You are speaking from the heart. You're sharing your journey, but the questions that you're asking are questions that we would all be asking if we actually took the time to pause. And so I can't thank you enough for what you're sharing.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That feels great.
So the question, I don't know if I caught you off guard there. The question is what answers were you hearing to what is your practice?
Yeah. So I'll rather than what I was hearing, I'm just going to ask it again now and see what I hear now.
Perfect.
So what is my practice? My practice is listening. Mm-hmm. My practice is learning to align with what is. My practice is opening to what I don't know. My practice is learning to be nicer to myself. My practice is telling the truth. My practice is coming into the present moment as much as possible. My practice is to heal my emotions, meet the world internally before I meet it externally. Things like that.
Woohoo! Thank you so much for sharing on that. I want to jump to a bit of the external in a minute. Before we do that, would you mind sharing about bees and BandAids?
Yeah, sure. So recently I just wrote a little post about an experience I had about a month ago. I was at a family reunion, and my brother took me to get my first tattoo, which is here. Can you see that?
Like a guitar pick on the inside of your forearm.
Exactly.
Very
here.
cool. Yes, yeah. Oh,
Okay.
even better. Okay, we got it. Awesome.
Great. Okay. So ever since my dad passed away, which was 4 years ago, a little over 4 years, I'd wanted a tattoo. And I will also say the day he passed away, was the day I stopped throwing up, because I was like, I want this to mean something positive. So no matter what happens, I won't ever do that to myself again. So that day just carries a lot of meaning for me. But I could never think of what I wanted. Finally, my dad was a really skilled guitar player and loved it. And so the guitar pick was always a symbol that most reminded me of him. My brother, who has a bunch of tattoos, was always the person I'd wanted to take me to get a tattoo. And he took me about a month ago. And as the tattoo artist started to paint,
well put.
I was looking at my brother and kind of talking to him. And my brother put his hand on my shoulder and said, just pay attention to what this feels like. Because you're going to want to know, this is going to be over in about 5 minutes. It's a small tattoo. And you're going to want to know what getting a tattoo feels like. So he invited me to pay attention instead of to, flinch away from the pain or try to distract myself like one might do, at the dentist or something like that. And so I really put my attention on the feeling. And so you mentioned bees and BandAids. That was the analogy that I experienced. When the needle would touch down, it suddenly felt like I was being stung by a whole bunch of bees. And then the pain would lift, it would be less, and just this gentle kind of burning, like someone tearing off a Band-Aid. And then he would pick up the needle, put it back down, and that cycle would repeat. All these bees, and then just the Band-Aid. My brother's invitation to pay attention, because getting a tattoo is a pretty rare experience, or for some people. After that, I realized this isn't just advice for a tattoo. I mean, everything might, like, what does your coffee really taste like? And what does even tapping on your phone really feel like? Things that happen maybe all the time. How much have we really paid attention? So it just sort of prompted me to spend more time going all the way into experiences, whether they're unusual or normal, and just really getting to know what it feels like. Because that is what is life. It's this series of experiences. And so why not really know what life feels like?
So I'm guessing the bees and Band-Aids, even in the moment, even in the bee sting moment, aren't quite as, I don't know if unnerving is the right word. There's something about the senses that changes, the experience that changes when you're bringing your awareness to it. Yeah.
My experience is, one of my practices is listening. And if I'm really paying attention to experience, then there's not a lot of extra, I'm afraid of that, or I don't want that, or I do want that. Well, actually, to put it this way, if I'm really paying attention to experience, I can also pay attention to, let's say you're, like this morning I had a donut for breakfast, which I do frequently. I love donuts. But if I'm really paying attention to the experience, I might realize halfway through that, like, I'm not enjoying this taste anymore, and I'll stop eating it. Whereas if I'm not paying attention, I might be used to the memory, I love donuts, and I eat the whole donut without noticing when I stopped enjoying it. So it's not, in the tattoo analogy, maybe it was less painful, maybe it was more. But more importantly, I get to notice what's my experience in this. And then I have a lot more choice. I'm not planning to get any bigger tattoo anytime soon. That was plenty of discomfort. I'm like, now I look at tattoos and I have so much respect because I know how it feels. But that's, I think, one thing I love about paying attention. One, I get to just enjoy it more, know it more. But also I get more, there's more me in it.
So how was the donut this morning?
It was kind of mediocre. I only ate half. I mean, it was fine, but it wasn't as fresh as usual. And I was glad for the couple bites, and I was glad to know, and I was glad to throw it away.
There's nothing better than a great donut, and a stale donut is really a just say no.
Right? Yeah, totally.
So let's go from there. And if you don't mind sharing, you had a very experience about 5 days ago, a TED Talk in Boulder, Colorado.
Yeah.
How was that, and what was your main goal of what you wanted to share with the world?
Well, one thing, I'll just tweak that a little bit, because every time I give a talk, which isn't very often, I just wanted to tweak it because in some ways I really thought about what I wanted to say to that audience, specifically in Boulder, Colorado. And it might not be the same thing I would share with a different part of the world. Because I was aware that Boulder's a pretty tech-heavy town. It also has a school, a really good school, so a lot of students. So I thought about that in connection with my journey, and what I really wanted to share with people was something I hadn't really realized when I was going through college and getting a job, and which was that path of that success path, which has so much validation on it. It's not, there's a choice. And that path, often we think, well, if I get the promotion, if I become the manager, if I'm the entrepreneur, I will feel some kind of worthiness. Or if I'm the one starting my own thing, that's something. I live in the Bay Area now. It's kind of, there's this, it feels a bit like an epidemic of you need to be the one starting the thing to feel worthy. And I think there's plenty of genuine entrepreneurs, but that's not for everybody. But it's so sexy right now. And so I don't want to say just entrepreneurship, but just really question. I just want to invite people to really question and tell people on my journey, I did all the things that you do that should make you happy, and I wasn't happy. And so now it's taken, sometimes I feel like I'm learning to walk. I feel like a toddler who's like, okay, I can do it the old way, but that doesn't fulfill me. So I have to do it this new way, and it's very frustrating many times. When I look at all my peers doing amazing external things, and I'm sitting inside my house journaling the answer to a question like, what do I most want myself to know right now? So I could spend an hour doing that, and then it could be all these voices of like, what are you doing? You're not being productive. You're not getting anything done. You're not, doing anything that anybody even knows about or counts. All these questions, but that's what I feel called to do. So I just wanted to really say there's a choice. It doesn't have to look like what you think it might look like, and all these things that everybody agrees are good. They still can be good, but they might not be yours. And to just really get in relationship with that.
Woohoo! You're helping people to wake up so that they go through the journey with at least a little bit more presence or listening to themselves.
I hope so.
Awesome. So is that what you would call, there's something I read about that you were talking about calling a values-based life?
Yeah, I think that might be it. A values-based life. Yeah, it's really like, so I can give an example. Yesterday I was talking to a friend, and I'm a Capricorn. I don't know that much about astrology. I've just been told that Capricorns really like productivity and getting a lot of things done. And so it can be kind of my Capricorn side that can do all the to-do lists and, that whole thing. But one of my values is, and my Capricorn side, I'm just calling her that, can do a lot of planning and for the future. But one of my values is, how much of this moment can I experience, like coming back to the present. And it's my value, not because anybody said it's good, but because when I do that, I feel more aligned and more complete. So I was just having this conversation with that part of me that wants to plan and get things done. And I was just inviting her, that part of me, to put all of her Capricorn productivity energy into whatever the current task is. So if it's making dinner, like let her make the most like, efficient, beautiful meal she can. So I was kind of trying to give her a job that was more aligned with my values than the job she used to have, which was like, how can I plan this amazing project that everybody's going to think awesome things about, and other things she'd get caught up doing that didn't actually feed me.
That makes sense. You talk about, you experimented with, I'm not even sure if that's the right term, and I'm not sure if you're doing it anymore, the LEAH cat. And I'm not. So I think you're referring to when I used to wear a cat mask at times. Yeah, and what I'm thinking of now, where I'm kind of overlaying it, is I'm thinking of our kitties being completely in the experience. And when they're in the experience, nothing else really matters.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's true. So I have a bit of an inner cat. That's kind of my inner animal. Mm-hmm. My nickname at home is Animal. And that's a bit what she helps me do. So, for a while I used to wear a cat mask, just kind of around the house, occasionally out at the city, but it would just remind me to just be who I am, do what I want. When I want to love someone, go up and love them. And when I'm done, just walk away. Just this
true
permission.
kitty style.
Exactly. I think cats are great teachers for that particular thing, which is do what you want when you want to do it. You can be a jerk when you feel like being a jerk, and you can be super affectionate when you want to be affectionate, and people just love you anyway.
Woohoo! I know my wife, Jessica, she definitely has her inner cat going on. And it also means that you have to approach her, and just like you have to approach any kitty, with the right energy.
Yeah.
Becomes very important. So on that note, before we go into a few wrap-up questions, Jessica always likes me to ask you obviously you don't have kids yet, but what advice, just like you were giving to quote-unquote kids in Boulder, so to speak, what advice would you give to parents or kids today to help them on their path?
Yeah. It's great. My best friends live next door. They had a baby last month, so we're really in this conversation a lot. So a couple things. So I would say for the parents, I guess the biggest thing I'm into right now is just really validating our current experience, whether it's the kids or the parents. And if you're the parent, I would say parents first, then kids. If you're frustrated with something that your kid's doing, let yourself be frustrated. It doesn't mean you have to be frustrated at the kid, but really allow oh man, I'm frustrated right now. And just allow that experience, because it's what's happening. It's true. There's no getting around it. And the most, I think the way that we don't love ourselves is to negate our experience. So if you're frustrated, be frustrated. There's nothing wrong with frustrated. Everyone gets frustrated. That's why my comics are probably so universal. It's just they name the things that are just true to the human experience. And I think, so that's the one thing. And I have a friend who has a daughter, and they have an anger wall in their house, which means if you're ever angry, go be angry. Just be angry at the wall instead of at someone. So sometimes they'll both be angry from something that occurred, and then they just sit there at the wall, just being like, and they'll both be doing it, and it just allows their anger without anyone getting hurt or attacked or anything like that.
I think it also makes that shift. What is it? That Shakespearean shift from tragedy to comedy. When you're both hating on the wall, all of a sudden you look at each other in just a moment of pure silliness.
Exactly. Well, that's my experience. It's that when you allow any emotion, whether it's anger, jealousy, sadness, joy, to really just let it run through as an emotion, not necessarily as words or content, but just let the physical experience of the emotion have its full life. It just goes away. It just wants, my teacher, Byron Katie, she's one of my teachers, will often say, every thought is just wanting a friend. So just let it have its friendship, and then it doesn't need to pester you anymore.
I'm thinking of a beautiful cartoon you have in your book of holding your emotions lightly. And so you're holding the balloons of your emotions lightly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Beautiful. But what would you say is the importance of self-love?
Importance of self-love. I guess the words that are coming to me are just, what else is there? So when I look at you or I look around the room, it's just everything that I see is in my experience. Mm-hmm. So self-love is the act of loving me and my whole experience. There's nothing that can escape. There's nothing that's outside of my experience from my point of view. So self-love is the way to love everything.
Woohoo! Awesome. From there, a question we like to ask just before the end is, what personally brings you, the greatest happiness, or what I call the woohoo factor?
Well, those are sort of two different answers. What
Go for it.
brings me the greatest woohoo factor is jumping on a trampoline, for
awesome.
Sure. I think what brings me the greatest happiness, I answer that a little bit sideways because in my experience, happiness is a bit like an emotion, and when I try to chase it, I suffer. So my attention's a little bit more on what brings me the greatest feeling of alignment or feeling fulfilled or rightness. And that really is attention, kindness, and welcoming of whatever my present moment experience is.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So on that note, where can people go to find out more, to find your writing, to find your beautiful book? And this book is filled with such incredible wisdom. I don't know how you do it. Page after page, the amount of wisdom and alignment in here, to steal one of your words, is just beautiful.
Thank you. Almost all of the comics that I've ever drawn are on my website, dharmacomics.com. And the book, though, has about several comics that have never been seen and that are only in the book. You can find all the places where you can pre-order the book or order the book on my website. And then it's at all the places you might expect: Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Powell's, IndieBound, BAM. And yeah.
Beautiful. And your website again?
It's dharmacomics.com, DHARMA comics.com.
And if you didn't catch that, if you're driving down the road, just go on over to inspirenationshow.com and we'll get you over to Leah's site as well. One of the things I was fascinated by on your website, it said, if you're excited to share, repost, or do all of these wonderful, great things with my comics, do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one thing, like I said, when I looked at that little comic and I said, where did you come from? I do not experience these as mine. Mm-hmm. These are gifts that have come to me that have saved my life. If they belong anywhere, I want them to go.
Awesome. So Leah, before we do a really short meditation at the end, any last words of wisdom you want to share with people?
I guess just one other thing I like to share, and you'll see when you see the comics, is that, it blows my mind that I ended up being an artist because I had no training, I had no skill, I didn't even have interest, to be honest. But one day I wanted to draw this little image, and I think the invitation I wanted to be, I think sometimes when people step out on this path of what makes me happy, that they try sometimes to think of something big, and it has to be this big, hard, complicated thing. So I just really wanted to invite just to start so small, whether it's like sewing a napkin for your house because you think you might kind of like sewing, or, learning to sing one song well because you're interested in singing, or whatever it is. Just my path has been little step by little step by little step. And so I really just like to invite that just the little steps.
Perfect. We had on another guest earlier this week who's talking about the little steps are manageable. Once you put the big mountain, I'm going to become an artist, all of a sudden it squashes everything.
Mm-hmm.
So
and it's just, in my experience, it's not doable. It's like, I can pick up a pencil and draw. I can't become an artist. That's not even a thing I can do. So it makes the mind and body kind of freak out because you're telling me to do something that I can't actually do. So yeah, putting the attention on what's doable, in my experience, makes it doable.
Woohoo! So do you have a brief meditation you wouldn't mind sharing with people?
Sure. So yeah, I'll just from the spirit of what we're talking about. So I would just invite you to close your eyes, or not.
Oh yeah, keep your eyes open if you're driving down the road.
Yeah. And just notice what's something I'm curious about. What's something about my life that I'm curious about? If I could know one thing, what might it be? And put your attention maybe on your belly button, somewhere towards the middle of your body, and just see what answers are there. What do I really want to know? What do I really want to know? And when you're ready, open your eyes. Just feel free to take that question or whatever question comes when you ask into your day or week or life.
Thank you so much, Leah. This has been such an honor, a pleasure, a joy. The superlatives could go on and on. I am so thrilled to have had you on the show today.
Thank you. Thank you. Likewise.
So I've got to crank it back up for the finish. For everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun, get drawn together, and open your heart up with tiny steps. And shine bright. Woohoo! Thank you.
Thank you. That was great.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like below. Also, leave your comments. Have some real fun with it. Subscribe to our channel where you're going to get more great videos, more interviews coming up. And check out our website, inspirenationshow.com. That's where you'll find tips, blogs, information, videos you won't find anywhere else, and useful and helpful resources to really help you kickstart your life and to shine bright. Thanks so much again. Thank you for your support. Like, comment, subscribe. See the website. Thanks so much and have fun. Of course, shine bright. Woohoo!